Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention, maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord. Hey, g'day everybody. Happy New Year. How's it going? Welcome back to Voice of Gord at the start of 2025. Short little intro here for you. I've got Lee Schmitt coming up to discuss his candidacy to lead the FMCSA as part of the incoming and returning Trump administration. The FMCSA being the American regulators who oversee trucking and have been doing a very, very poor job of it over the last few years, basically since their inception. But yeah, Lee will tell you all about that, and we have a very lively discussion. On that note, I published something on my Substack here recently. If you haven't subscribed already, autonomoustruckers.substack.com. It was a fairly lengthy essay, blog post, if you will, on the problem with so many truck drivers in America and Canada now not being from America or Canada, and more importantly, not being properly trained, more often than not even speaking English, and seeming to be getting in an awful lot of accidents and causing chaos on our roads. And I examine how it is that this is happening and where it is that all of our checks and balances are failing, and what is the impetus behind the employ of these folks rather than people that actually know what they're doing. I think it was a pretty good essay. It's been read 5,500 times already, according to my Substack analytics. It's made the rounds, and I think it should make more. And if you can read that and pass it to interested parties for me, that would be great. As always, I'm eager to hear your feedback, good, bad, or otherwise, suggestions, corrections, hate mail, whatever you got. Hit me up. Gordylocks, GORDILOCKS @protonmail.com. My inbox is open. You can also find me on Twitter @GordMcGill. You can find my guests trucking across America with the Schmitts on Twitter as well. I'll have a link to their Twitter and to their change.org petition for Lee to join the FMCSA and help fix up trucking. All right, well, let's get to it. All right, g'day everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Voice of Gord podcast. I'm Gord, and this is my voice. I have some returning voices to the show, former guests of mine, colleagues in trying to fix up the trucking industry, and all around good people. Lee and Lisa Schmitt are joining the show to discuss a very interesting development, which is that Lee Schmitt has put his foot forward to become the head of the FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which is the federal American government entity that looks after trucks and truck drivers and all things trucking. They're a very big regulator in Washington with an annual budget of $951 million a year, and they suck. And Lee is hoping to change that. You would have remembered Lee and Lisa from an episode I did near the beginning of the show, talking about an advocacy organization they are part of called CDL Drivers Unlimited. Apparently, Lee has stepped aside from that position so as not to be in conflict of interest with his candidacy to become the leader of the FMCSA. And Lee and Lisa are here to join me to talk about this candidacy, issues in trucking, and what they hope to achieve should Lee become the head of the FMCSA. Welcome to the show, Lee and Lisa.
Thanks, Gord, for having us.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, thanks for being here at such an early hour. My favorite time to record shows, my only time to record shows, usually. Once the kids and my wife get up around here, that's it. All of my projects go out the window and it's full time dad business. So, it's December 31st, 2024 recording time. And in 3 weeks, we are going to see the return of President Trump to the Oval Office of the White House, leading the apparently, supposedly, the freest nation on earth. And with the new Trump administration comes changes to the leadership of many of the government's agencies that oversee all things America, including the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. So, Lee, can you tell us when you decided to put your foot into, put your name in to become the leader of the FMCSA, and what sort of animated your decision to do so?
Actually, shortly after voting took place, when we knew Trump was going to be president, we'd sat and talked about it and decided that was the time to do it. Get your foot in the door early, be first. The reason why we did it was we've been in advocacy since 2017, started with the ELD, and we've gone back and forth to DC, meet with congressmen, senators, FMCSA. We actually feel like we can't do anymore. It's like you're hitting your head against the wall. And this is the best way that we know to possibly help make change in the industry.
Right, yeah. The federal bureaucracy, and I'm sure this happens at the state level too, is kind of an immovable object, a bit of inertia that's very difficult to overcome unless you get in it yourself or you have boatloads of money. And we do not have boatloads of money, do we?
No, and that's, we're hoping that with this administration, now would be the time to do something like this. I mean, they want to come in and make sweeping reforms as much as possible. Why not try to do something like this as a driver?
Right. And something else that's been going on with the FMCSA, and I'm hoping this doesn't happen to you, sir, should this venture provide a result, is that the FMCSA has been churning through leadership just like the industry churns through drivers. Seems they've had more than a few of them here over the last two administrations. There's been quite a few different FMCSA administrators, and all of them basically, no reason to remember them. I don't even remember what their names are, except the last one, this lady named Robin Hutchison, who is memorable only for, being that very immovable object and impervious to change, and seemed to me like she didn't want to listen to reason. So, yeah, I would think having a driver that understands what's going on with the industry and is willing to consider the actual facts on the ground would be a much better improvement over the sort of, clown cars that have come and gone through the FMCSA thus far.
Since its inception, FMCSA has had 6 confirmed administrators and 13 acting administrators in all that time. The president appoints their choice for the FMCSA administrator, and then the Senate has to confirm them. And then the head of the DOT, which we know now is Sean Duffy, they actually choose the deputy administrator and the chief safety officer, and then the Senate also has to approve those. Not once has any of those people ever driven a truck in their life that have been the administrator. In the Motor Carrier Act of 1999 that establishes the FMCSA, it is required that the administrator have professional experience in motor carrier safety. Now, you can translate that into lots of different ways. A guy that's run a safety at a motor carrier, a guy that's worked at the FMCSA for 5 years and done all kinds of regulations. I suppose you could say that's motor carrier safety, but we believe that driving out on the roads and living under the regulations and seeing how the regulations translate to real life experiences out on the road. Lee's driven for over 30 years, no accidents, a very, very safe record. And we haul big, oversized loads. So it's even more important that we're safe on the roads with our securement and with our escorts, and people's lives are really on the line with our loads. So, yeah, we believe it needs to be someone that actually has driven.
Right. And this is, this is not something that's unique to trucking. Across many areas of the economy and business, people often desire the regulators and bureaucrats to have some kind of idea of what they're talking about, and more often than not, they don't. And, I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. In sort of Western society, we're run by what you might call now a professionalized managerial caste of people who are groomed from first going to university and possibly even earlier to be managers. They are always academic, always going to school, always going to meetings, always, had stuck in meeting rooms or in books. And this caste are often well connected. They're parts of certain families. They go to certain schools, and the government sort of picks these people to run things rather than those with experience on the ground, such as yourselves, which leads me to a question I've been thinking about a lot since I first heard about Lee putting his best foot forward and taking on this challenge, is that the unfortunate reality of this professionalized managerial case is such that I think you guys are going to have a hard time, even if you did get appointed, let's say by somebody like Vivek Ramaswamy or whoever. Have you found a partner or someone to work with who knows how to navigate this professional managerial class of people, the bureaucracy, the immovable object, whatever you want to call it? Because again, they're kind of self-serving and they have no idea about what goes on out there in the real world, and they sort of have they have an attitude that they're trying to keep themselves in charge. And so they have a sort of immune reaction when outsiders come in, right? And you saw this with the deep state and the federal bureaucracy and how they dealt with Trump or didn't deal with Trump and tried to get rid of him. So who or what is your plan to fight that within the FMCSA itself if you do become the leader?
Actually, I have thought about that because that's been brought to our attention. A lot of people are like, well, you don't know how to manage 1,000 people, employees. All right. I report to Sean Duffy, who's the head of the DOT. My job would be to oversee the administration under what Duffy wants to do and wishes of the president's administration. I do know that there's a lot of things that the FMCSA has done over the past few years that can be reversed. They've given themselves unchecked power in certain areas that I don't believe they have. And as the administrator, with help from Duffy and the president, you would reverse some of them things. And then I guess I would just meet with a line out of Elon Musk. You meet with all the employees. If not all the employees that work there, you would meet with the head of each department. What is it you guys are working on? What do? You don't want to go in and make waves and just completely lambast everything. You need to go there, take notes, see how things are happening. And over the years, there is a few employees that work there that I wouldn't consider them allies, but I would consider them, I could talk to them and say, hey, I don't agree with this. Is there a way to work on this? And I think they would give me a straight, honest answer, even though they are part of the bureaucracy, because they know that we would like to see change as the driver's perspective over the years. There's just certain things that we couldn't do or could do, and they would be the people that are on the inside that might say, this is the avenue you might want to try going down. So I guess that would be my short answer on it.
Do you believe or perceive that there's any kind of, innate sort of animosity or, as I put it, an immune response that you're going to have to deal with? Like, let's say you do win, let's say you get selected, and now there's
Yeah.
going to be people within the FMCSA are like, oh, a truck driver without credentials is now our boss. Like,
Yeah.
I have to imagine that there are going to be people there. Maybe it's only a small handful, maybe it's a bunch of them, I don't know. But like, it just strikes me that there's going to be some folks there that are going to give you a hard time.
And there is, and I'm dealing with that. And the line would be, my first response was I wanted them to quit. And the other line to follow it up should be, no, I should go up and say thank you for telling me something that ticked me off and makes me want to be your boss now. So thank you. And I guess that's the way to handle it.
2024, the FMCSA has been around quite a while now as a subdivision of the United States Department of Transportation, which is, about their current leader, Pete Buttigieg, is about to be unemployed here in a couple of weeks. And as you said, Mr. Duffy is the new DOT guy?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, Sean Duffy.
And he's from your home state of Wisconsin.
Yes, he is, and he was our congressman.
I'm assuming you guys have dealt with him before.
Yes, we have.
So, to your mind, give us a quick rundown on your feelings about Mr. Duffy, and as a person, as a regulator and a politician, and maybe address any concerns people might have about him.
So
I'll let her address both, and I'll do it also. Go ahead.
when we first met Sean Duffy was in 2017 when we went to Washington, D.C. on our original trip, thinking we were just going to run into D.C. and get rid of the ELD and go back to trucking and live our life. Well, here we are, 7 years later. Sean Duffy listened to us. Our record is in his office. We are signed on. Sean Duffy used to be a logger. He did logging things. He has a slice log in his office, and you all sign that when you come in there. So our names are signed on a couple of those logs. And he also, a little known fact about Sean Duffy, when the ELD came into effect, Brian Babin put in a bill for approval of Congress that never passed. But what it did was it exempted small businesses from the ELD, small owner operators and small companies. And Sean Duffy signed on to that bill as a co-sponsor. So you kind of have a known mindset of where Sean's mind is. He is for the small businesses. And being that he's from Wisconsin and has Midwest values, we also have those same small Midwest values.
Right. Well, that sounds good. If he was for, exempting owner operators and small businesses from this mandate, that tells me he knows something about subsidiarity and understands the problems of scale. So those are to his to the plus side of the ledger for Mr. Duffy.
And I think my advantage with him would be, I'm from Wisconsin, so is he. We're direct. He's been in politics for a while, then went home when his last child was born. He had health issues. He's back in this. All right. He would be somebody that I could talk to and just speak plain. We're from Wisconsin. We're blunt, straightforward, and he understands that. So he would be an ally that way to speak with. Also, he would obviously be my boss because you report to him, but I think it would be an easy conversation to have back and forth with him.
Right. Well, that's good news. Other people you're going to have conversations with in the position as FMCSA administrator are other trucking advocacy organizations and corporate lobby groups, right? So if you're the head of the FMCSA, ostensibly you're supposed to have listening sessions with other drivers, which I'm sure you two have been present at plenty of those. And then you're going to have to deal with people like OOIDA, or the Truckload Carriers Association, or the ATA, or the Teamsters, right? So I'm curious what your approach would be in dealing with all of these various advocacy organizations who are going to be beating down your door every day.
Actually, that's funny. I could point blank tell them you're full of crap, basically, because I've lived this life for the last 30 some odd years. I mean, it would be polite. I'd have to tell them that. But see, that would be the advantage to a driver being in charge of this. You're bringing a perspective that they have no clue in DC what is. We sit out here and we watch all the regulations that are done. Some are good, majority are bad. But we can bring the perspective back of, no, that doesn't work in the real world scenario. It looks good on paper. So when it comes to the lobbyists coming in pushing for their thing, I can go back at them. No, you're full of crap. That's not how it is. There's no driver shortage. You're doing things like that. You can call their bluff on it. But at the same time, you have to be conscious that any of these guys all of a sudden can get an attorney and sue you because, you know, you open your mouth. That is one of the bad things about being in that position. So I guess I would have to be in check on that quite a bit because I call BS on a lot of stuff that they do.
Right. And over and above the lobby groups, trucking overlaps most things in America, most avenues of endeavor, most industries overlap with others, issue upon issue upon issue, which then means you're having to work with other bureaucracies, right? You just mentioned the driver shortage. That's great. I want to transfer to that because we've had in the last week a major kerfuffle online and out in the wider zeitgeist about the use of these H-1B work visas. And it's been revealed that contrary to the people who want to use them, it's not just for extremely talented, elite human capital, excellent engineers. This program has been abused so companies can hire just about anybody, including truck drivers. I found a gentleman on Twitter who went through all of the downloads, because this is all publicly available information about these H-1B visas, who's using them and for what and how much money and rates of pay. All of that information has now been released to the public downstream of this online debate. And it turns out a bunch of different companies are using H-1B visas to bring truck drivers here from other countries. And that's over and above the traditional avenue of doing that with H-2B visas and E-3B visas. So there's all of this noise and, as you and I would agree, lies about a truck driver shortage. But these companies keep abusing these three visa programs to keep bringing more truck drivers to America from other countries, even though 2024 has had an extremely terrible freight market. There's been thousands upon thousands of truckers laid off, owner-operators parking their rigs and giving up their MC numbers. It's just bad out there, and they keep issuing these visas. The problem is that the visas are issued by Department of Homeland Security and Immigration and all that. So within the FMCSA, I'm assuming you'll have some influence in some way to talk to these agencies, but at the end of the day, the visa issuing is up to them. So what are you going to do? What are you going to say? What's your sort of strategy to deal with these other bureaucracies?
Well, that one's a simple one. Actually, it goes back to a regulation that's on the books already. It's called English. Speaking English. That regulation's been on the books for a very long time. You can't read and speak English, you can't drive a truck. That just stopped a bunch of it right there. Now,
so you are aware that regulation was hand waved away in a memorandum in the later part of the Obama administration in mid 2016, before President Trump took over. There was I believe it was from the FMCSA itself, who basically instructed DOT officers to not enforce the law, to not seize the CDL of anybody who demonstrably could not speak or communicate in English. And I think that's been the little loophole gateway these guys have been using since 2016 to just put whoever they want on the road.
Right, and it's still on the books. So you know what? Enforce the regs that are on the books. I've said for a long time, ICC was disbanded in '96 because they were a corrupt organization. Then the Surface Transportation Board took over for a while. '99, they come up with the Motor Carrier Act to create the FMCSA. They've been in business for 25 years, starting here tomorrow. They're damn near just as corrupt as the ICC. They need to get back to what was basically in the Motor Carrier Act of 2000, which started them, which is safety is their job. You start going back and start enforcing the regs to change this industry back around. Stop doing all this other DEI crap, basically, in this industry. So that would be a start.
It's funny. I only found out about this memorandum from another sort of newish, new to me anyway, trucker advocacy group. These guys down in Arkansas called American Truckers United. I had no idea about this, hand waving away of the English requirements for CDLs. I mean, we've seen it out on the road. Like, you go to any truck stop now, and it might as well be the United Nations, and not everybody is fluent in the lingua franca of the country we're all in. And now I know why. I had no idea about this, and I'm just curious to know, I mean, this is probably less of a question about being ahead of the FMCSA, but just your opinion, which might inform how you lead the FMCSA, as to why, say, OIDA or Overdrive Magazine or any of the other sort of institutional trucker advocacy organizations or trucking media organizations haven't been harping on that enough. Like, if that's been a known thing now since 2016, and even somebody like me who, I like to think I know what's going on in the trucking business, I only found out about this memorandum like a month ago.
We've known about it quite a while ago, that FMCSA petitioned CVSA to not enforce it. A long time ago, we learned that. I'm of the mindset, I'm not afraid to step on toes. I'm not afraid to ruffle feathers like OIDA or the lobbyists are or anything else. They're all looking where they can get their next paycheck or this and that. I don't care. I'm going there, hopefully going there, to change the industry back to make it safe. Drivers have gotten in such a bad light over the years that we're the problem of all the crashes in the industry. We're not. There's very few crashes are caused by truck drivers in the industry. It's the cars that are actually doing it. So that needs to change, the perspective on that. And I'm not going there to make a career out of it. I still own a semi. I still drive up until the president appoints me and I get picked in this position. I'll do that. When that is over, I'm going back to my truck. I enjoy what I do. So there just needs to be a few things need to get back to make trucking decent again.
Right. You mentioned cars. I harp on the safety thing quite a bit on my Twitter account and on my Substack. And, I'm very hard on the trucking business. But you're right. It takes two to tango. And a lot of this is also the fault of people driving cars. More often than not, whenever there's an incident between a truck and a car, it's usually the car driver's fault. Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, that's for motor carriers. Cars are not considered motor carriers. I'm wondering what influence you might be able to bring to bear on the regulation of car drivers, let's say with the DOT, to try and get the states to reform their licensing requirements. Because one of the big deals here in America and in Canada especially is that, like, there's a mindset, and we're probably all guilty of it, that, like, driving is our God-given right. Driving is actually a privilege granted to you by the state. You might not like it, you might disagree with that, but that's what it is. The state gives you a license after you demonstrate some technical capability with operating a car. And, pursuant to what we just spoke about here, it seems to me like maybe that privilege shouldn't be extended to so many people, because a lot of them are not technically capable or safe or considerate of other road users, and a lot of those people are driving cars. What do you think you could do within the FMCSA to exert pressure on those who regulate car drivers?
One of the things that you talked about earlier with Lee was dealing with other agencies. And this is where this would come in huge, is education for the car drivers. You know, you work with the state DOTs and get some further education and testing in there for cars to drive around semis. You know, we do a social media called Trucking Across America with the Schmitts, where we educate the public about how to drive safely around semis. Nobody gets this in their driver's education anymore when they're getting their licenses. It needs to be brought back and educate them how to drive around a semi, where the blind spots are. My husband even suggested at one point that there's actual questions on the test about semis that you have to cover in order to be able to get your license. And it's not something that we want regulation. It's more of an education, you know, than anything. Everything doesn't have to be accomplished by laws and regulations. You know, I know that the highway department out there on the roads right now, we see signs for, you know, if you're drunk, call a cab. Okay, that's a service announcement. So we can do the same kind of things from the FMCSA, you know, educating the public for safety of semis.
And along that line, I wanted to add that we did speak to our state and talk to them about getting questions on the test. And they give us a list of things that had to be done. So I would go in with that knowledge to the DOT and say, look, we're from Wisconsin, we can do this. Let's just try to push it throughout the rest of the country.
And try to have additional questions and testing requirements on obtaining your car license pertaining to trucks.
I'm of the mindset you can, you know, they always have it. You have to pass so much or this and that, you still get your license. No, these 2 or 3 questions that are on there, if you get them wrong, you don't get your license. These 2 or 3 questions you must know the answers to. So it would just be an educational thing.
Right. Good stuff. Other regulatory hammers the FMCSA had on their sort of list as of last year, that they put on ice because the election was coming up, that might be revivified by certain bureaucrats within the FMCSA. The speed limiter thing is, you know, it's something truck drivers hate, and has been, you know, we've seen what's happened with that in Ontario and Quebec, and you know, and big companies that already speed limit their trucks voluntarily, and the sort of problems that creates. There's also a proposal to not remove the exemption to the ELD mandate for older trucks, but to like extend it back to 1994 model year rather than 2000. Those are 2 pretty contentious things. I'm assuming that if you're head of the FMCSA, they just get obliterated.
The speed limiter thing would get obliterated as far as I'm concerned. States used to have split speed limits. Ohio used to have it. I think New York and Pennsylvania had it also. I know California still does. All the states went back to the same speed. It's proven that split speeds cause crashes. So no, unless you're going to regulate the motoring public to the exact same speed, that would never happen as long as I was there. The ELD, I know that they're trying to do it now to where it can be just basically an app on your phone instead of being hooked to the truck, which is what we were advocating for at the beginning when you're pushing for this. Why does it need to be hardwired to the truck? Personal own opinion, there's nothing wrong with the ELD if you stop the tracking, which is unconstitutional when I'm off duty and stuff. But the ELD is just a tool like a logbook. The problem is the hours of service. ELD just keeps track of your hours of service, what you're doing. Hours of service is screwed up. So that's my own opinion on that. I guess I would see how that goes with everybody else. If you go in with the attitude that everything is bad and you have to get rid of it, you're not going to be there. You know, like I've said, I don't agree with some of the things on it. The tracking, for one, you can't track a sex offender. That's been proven in the Supreme Court, but yeah, you can track a truck driver. That's wrong. So there just needs to be certain parts of that ELD that need to be modified.
Right. Yeah, I remember doing some research on this and how they managed to get around the Fourth Amendment, which is to say your right to be free of unreasonable search and seizure, which includes this surveillance stuff.
But that all came out of I can't remember the name of that. The Patriot Act,
right,
is what gave them, okay, the Patriot Act has not been funded for years. So a guy should be able to go back and remove some of that crap now.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate they keep recycling it, much like they do with the sort of, the authorization for use of military force and all these other, zombie regulations from the Bush administration that they just won't get rid of because people make money off of it. But that's another story. But yeah, the way they got around the Fourth Amendment, I thought was like ridiculous. They said there's some kind of clause about the pervasively regulated industries. So basically, if your industry is already regulated, they can say, well, if you're regulated, we can just regulate you some more. That's an actual function of our government. Like it's just like a snake eating its own tail. You're already regulated. Yeah. We are allowed to regulate you more.
Yeah, heavily regulated industry. Why are we heavily regulated? Because the regulators keep putting more regulations on you.
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous, and I'm hoping you can do something about that regards trucking. Yeah, that the speed limiter thing is wildly unpopular, and just for the benefit of anybody listening to this who's not a truck driver and who doesn't know the history of it and how it works, I'll give you an example from my own country. Right, I'm from Canada originally. The provinces of Ontario and Quebec brought in mandatory speed limiters in the mid-2000s. And so they said no commercial vehicle that you can program, that is to say has an electronic ECM, can drive over 105 kilometers an hour by law. Done. Doesn't matter what part of the North America you're from either. Originally, and I think they stopped enforcing this, but the Ministry of Transport of Ontario said, we don't care if you're from California, British Columbia, Florida, Mexico, don't care. You come to Ontario, that truck is programmed to do 105 kilometers an hour, or you're getting a fine. So what that did is it made the vast majority of the trucks on the road all stuck at this speed. Guys start trying to pass each other because one guy's tires are worn out a little more, or one guy's got a slightly different gear ratio. And you'd get these things called elephant races where like one truck's trying to pass another one for miles and miles and miles. And unfortunately, the speed limiter regulation, in tandem with an industry that has decided to employ maybe not the brightest people in the world and just handing out CDLs willy-nilly, results in these situations where two trucks just trying to pass each other, and the guy in the right truck's not smart enough to slow down and let the guy in the left truck go around, or maybe the guy in the left truck's not smart enough to just adjust his cruise control and be happy. And we get these situations where people get really frustrated and they get stuck in these long lineups behind trucks that are trying to pass each other. And then that creates another problem. And I don't think people understand that. Also, most incidents involving big trucks actually occur on roads that are less than highway speed, right? So you could be on some local road and the speed limit's 45 miles an hour. Well, a national speed limiter mandate setting the truck at 65 or 68 or whatever they're going to set it at makes no difference on those local lower speed limit roads. It doesn't do anything for it, right? So, like, I want people to understand that, yeah, it's great. It sounds great on paper. We're going to make the trucks slow down. But all that is technology that does not take into account the human element. And as pointed out by my friend Karen Levy in her great book, Data-Driven, Truckers' Technology and the New Workplace Surveillance, it hasn't done anything about the economic incentives, which is to say the pay-by-mile structure by which most long-haul truckers operate. And then you have the ELD, which makes it much more difficult to work around all of the delays that beset the average trucker, the loading and unloading times, the detention, traffic accidents, being stuck in traffic in urban areas, construction, bad weather, all of these things that affect you out on the road. And then when you actually do get your driving time, you're incentivized to drive that much faster to keep your schedule going. So I'm wondering, Lee, if you get nominated to be the head of the FMCSA, do you have any plans to work with other regulators and other departments to do something about detention? Because this is always a major problem on the minds of drivers, is that, we get stuck everywhere all the time and our time is never valued. There's no mechanism in law to make sure we get paid for it. And there's nothing forcing shippers and receivers to get their acts together and stop wasting our time. I'm just wondering if you have any ideas about what could be done about that through the FMCSA.
Through the FMCSA, not a thing, because they can't go into a business and tell the business how to pay the drivers on the docks or anything else. So FMCSA has no power that way. As a former truck driver, and as a truck driver now, I could talk with other department heads, Department of Labor, things like that. I am of the mindset drivers should have been paid a long time ago for all the time they spend on the dock. Nobody else goes to work and gives time for free. Why do drivers have to give time? They always, big thing when I was a company driver. Oh, you got to give 2 hours before we start detention. What? Why? You come to work for 2 hours free every day? No, you get paid. So why don't drivers? So that would be a conversation I would have with the Department of Labor. And just use the knowledge of being in the industry and speaking with lawmakers about the Fair Labor Standard Act that truck drivers are exempt from, things like that. FMCSA doesn't have jurisdiction in that department, but I could go outside and speak to other departments.
Right, so you could exert some influence rather than any direct
Correct.
work on policy, right. Well, that's good. Yeah, the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act, which Democratic Congressman Andy Levin brought forward a couple of years ago, continues to sit in committee, even though it's had co-signers in the Senate. So it's got a Senate version, it's got a Congress version. One line: remove the exemption for truckers in the 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act. No pork, not attached to any other omnibus bill. No taxes, no cost to the taxpayer. The government doesn't have to do anything except remove one line from an old piece of legislation. And damn, isn't it an indictment of how government functions that this simple one-line bill can't seem to get itself out of committee or get passed? What do you think is causing that, Lee?
Because somebody didn't get paid off would be the reason. And it's got to be the only reason. Somebody's afraid. And on the downside of everything I've just said, all right, I'm an owner-operator. I might have 4 or 5 employees underneath me. Now everybody's going to come back at me and say, well, you're not making enough money. How can you be doing this to be paying all these drivers overtime or this and that? It's a learning curve. There's some things you got to kind of deal with. There's companies out there, out of Wisconsin, that pay the drivers for everything. Martin is one of them, and I'll put their name out there because they're all over the internet. They pay their drivers if they have to sit somewhere. If a load gets canceled, the drivers get paid. If they don't get to do this or that, the driver gets paid. So it can be done. It's just people don't really want to do it. So some of that stuff can be taken over.
Right. Very good. Yeah. There are companies out there doing the right thing. I used to work for a couple of them back home in Canada. They always tried to pay us for detention time and or just a higher mileage rate to try and make up for some of this stuff. I worked in the oil field in Alberta for a number of years. That was all by the hour. These things can be done, and there's no reason why we should provide exemptions to the cheap freight haulers to continue abusing their drivers. Many of whom are recent arrivals, don't speak English, don't understand their rights, and don't understand that they're being screwed until it's too late. And I'd like to see these changes take place, as I'm sure many others would as well. So what's your plan or strategy to get your name in front of President Trump or anybody else who can get your name in front of President Trump as a nominee for this position? Like, how do you get from here to actually being considered a candidate? What's that mechanism look like?
We actually sent our resume to President Trump. Also sent it to the Department of Transportation, Sean Duffy. We also sent it through other people we knew in DC to try to get it to Trump, sent it to a transition team. So it is there. They have it. We have confirmation. Everybody has it. It's just a matter of getting through the list of all the people that they have or might be looking at before they win down to me. Am I going to get the position? I don't have a clue. Would I love the chance to sit for a half an hour, talk with the man, tell him what I'd like to see happen, get his viewpoint of what he should think should happen, and tell him from the driver's perspective what should change with help from the Department of Transportation and with the president to kind of push certain things to help change the industry. If I don't get chosen, okay, I'm still going to be a truck driver, still going back out on the road. That doesn't mean I'm not going to stop trying to do what I'm doing.
Right, yeah, just because you don't get the gig doesn't mean you can't keep making noise and advocating for better policies. One last question here before we go. A thing I discuss occasionally on this podcast and in my writings is the sort of future, which may or may not include the use of driverless trucks, autonomous technology. What's your position on, regulating this new technology and the many ramifications that it will have for the industry, including drivers? What are your thoughts on that, and how would that inform your potential leadership of the FMCSA in that area?
The DOT put out levels of everything that they wanted to do as far as autonomous vehicles. You'd have to go back to the DOT and tell them to slow this down. As far as the FMC and regulating certain things, they just tried getting the lifting of a regulation where they have to put the triangles out by their trucks. Okay, if you can't do that, you shouldn't be on the road. We shouldn't be able to make separate regulations just because you don't want a driver in a truck. You're not going to convince me that you're safer than a human being just because your computer can think 10 times faster than a person. I don't agree that there should be driverless trucks running down the road 80,000 plus pounds. If you want to have that technology, level 4, where they have the ads on trucks, I don't agree with that either. I think if companies want that on their truck, they should put it on their truck as something to help the drivers. But I don't think it's the federal government's responsibility to mandate that on all commercial vehicles because it is not a proven thing. It shows false positives. It could be some of the reasons why there's a lot of crashes from the younger drivers that don't know how to react when the truck tries to stop itself from doing certain things, causes it to get into a skid in snowy conditions, whereas a seasoned driver, not having all that automation, might have been able to control that truck and stop it from getting in a wreck. So that's my opinion, my stance on it. I'm not for it, but if you want this technology, there should be a driver in the truck at all times sitting there. You don't get special carve-outs just because you're a computer and you think that you're safe. We've learned over the years, the only way to prove that a truck can be better than a person is they have to commit suicide, basically. That truck doesn't know how to react in a crash because it hasn't happened. They can program it for this, they can program it for that, but you can't program for a crash until it starts causing crashes. So when you start making them trucks get in a crash, now it's going to learn from that. Well, you haven't done that yet. So no, I don't trust any of the automation.
Right, yeah. Something you brought up there too is the imposition of new technologies and choice, right? Every time some new technology comes along and they put it in a truck, that's fine if you want to use it, but it cannot become either the standard or imposed by the state, by the government. That's wrong. This front crash avoidance stuff, automatic transmissions, ELDs, all of these things are impositions from the top down I, as a driver or an owner-operator, did not ask for them, and I should be allowed to continue using older, proven technology matched with my experience as a human being with over a quarter century of operation on the road without the government saying, no, you must use this other stuff. Because we've proven that it makes it better for the low IQ muling cabbages that the CDL mill system puts on the road, so therefore you have to use it as well. I oppose these mandates, and I'm really glad that you do too, because I don't want somebody running the FMCSA that's going to jam more stuff down my throat that I don't want. And I think a lot of truck drivers feel that way as well.
Now, I'd like to add something in my defense to all of this. We're having this little conversation. We're all over social media posting we're applying for this position. There's a lot of drivers. Yeah, go for it. Great, good thing. And you have a handful of drivers that are opposed. And my response to a lot of them, and everybody listening to this show, you get the chance to speak to possibly, maybe, the head of the next administration, FMCSA. Have you ever done that before? So why sit and ridicule everything I'm trying to do in the industry from my perspective? Not that everything I want is going to happen. I've never said that. I'm going there with the perspective of the 30 plus years knowledge accident free. I know what you're doing wrong from my perspective. It wouldn't take much to change the industry. That's just one of my final thoughts I'd like to add.
Right, yeah, no, it wouldn't. You actually, it's interesting how like certain regulatory changes can and do change how industries, and not just trucking, but many others function. And a lot of it's simply like, the government saying you must do this or you can't do that anymore. And again, one of my bugaboos, one of the things I like to complain about is how the driver churn, driver retention problem that they call a shortage has become the sort of reasoning behind the reason behind so many other bad things happening in the industry, because they don't control they don't understand the human element, and by continually debasing the level of skill required to be on the road, and by making life more difficult for people who actually do know what they're doing, and then constantly suppressing wages to where you only get, low quality people applying for the job or being paid by the government to go and learn it. We have to be able to acknowledge these human elements. And you mentioned something before, DEI or wokedom or whatever. We're not allowed to criticize other people anymore or understand hierarchy. Understand that in fact, people are different. And in fact, some people are better at things than other people. And that's just the way it is. And they're trying to level everybody. So I think a thing that the FMCSA should do is just stop pretending that anybody could be a truck driver, because that's one of the major problems in this industry is this, mindset that you can just pull people off the street and throw them in a truck, assist them with technology, and everything's going to be fine. We can see all around us that that's not true.
On that point, you've probably done more research on the H-1 visas and all of that. I haven't done that much, and I probably should. But how do you get a license for 8-9 months out of the year? How do they get their CDLs for so many months if they're here? Is that a way that they're getting stay over their green card? I've never been to a state where you're not issued a license for 2, 4, 6, 8 years, whatever it is, but your visa is only issued for so long. How do you get a license that's only issued for so long? Maybe something should be done that way, as far as tie your visa to your driver's license. Visa expires. Your physical's tied to your driver's license. Why can't a visa be tied to it?
Yeah, that's a very good point, and an avenue worthy of investigation. Hey, I've kept you guys here for over an hour now. I want to be mindful of your time. Do you have any sort of final thoughts or messages for truckers or anybody else listening to this about your candidacy, or about what the FMCSA should focus on, whether or not you become its leader?
One thing that didn't make this conversation so far is the Chevron decision that came down from Supreme Court, that I know that Vivek was very, very alert about. He actually alerted us to that. And the regulations at the FMCSA have to be looked at now, the ones that have come out under this Chevron thing, and find out if indeed FMCSA has overstepped those bounds that Congress actually mandated them to do. So every regulation has to be looked at through those glasses at this point. And that's one of the things that we wanted to go under. And there's things that were in that original 1999 Motor Carrier Safety Improvement Act that FMCSA was ordered to do that they, as of today, still have not yet done. And that is, when you get your motor carrier authority, there was supposed to be some kind of a test to make sure that you were knowledgeable of the laws. And yeah, is that going to make it harder to get your authority? Absolutely. Shouldn't it be? Shouldn't it be more than just pay $300 and you can have a trucking company? You have to make sure these people getting their authorities have knowledge of these laws that they're going to be required to enforce upon their drivers. So how can you give them an authority without proving that they have knowledge of those regulations? So those are the 2 points that I think needed to be made during this discussion.
The Chevron deference thing sure does open up a can of worms for the government, because I think that's going to allow us to revisit some of the bad regulations. That's a really great point, Lisa.
I would just add that anybody that wants to help us, we've been asked, yeah, this is great, how can we help? We started a change.org petition just for people to sign up. If there's a chance we make it to the president, we can show them this. Hey, look, these are what all these people want. Aside from that, call your senator, because this is a position appointed by the president. It's not a vote by the general public. Call your senator, because it is Senate confirmation after selected by the president. That's how you can help.
Democracy, as they say, is not just voting. There's many other avenues by which you can interact with Leviathan and possibly get it to do little tiny things you might want it to do. That requires some participation. I went to a event recently held by some other guys called 10-4 DC, and there was an FMCSA guy there who said the same thing. He said, guys, you need to show up at the listening sessions, you need to write letters, you need to call us, you need to send emails, you need to make more noise. These people don't react if they don't hear things.
Yeah, case in point, aside from this, CARB, quite a while ago, EPA put out, do you still want us to regulate? Otherwise, we're going to hand it over to CARB, basically. Nobody commented. Now, that's why EPA follows whatever CARB puts out. It all could have been changed a long time ago. And I heard that right out of the EPA's mouth. You guys didn't argue back when all these regulations were coming in about the cleaner trucks. We let CARB take over. Now this is what we have. Maybe we could have changed it back then.
Well, that's a very good point. So yeah, everybody listening here, it's not just about getting Lee into a position of power or a position of influence. You guys have to participate as well. And, let your legislators know about things that are happening. You should be writing them about, let's nominate Lee, get the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act passed. And any other issue involving trucking, you should be on them about it, because if they don't know, they don't know. And a congressperson or other representative has got so many different people talking to them about so many different things. Unless you add yourself to that and squeeze yourself in, your issue is just going to get ignored.
Thank you for having us today, Gord. I didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to talk about.
No, guys, thanks for coming on. I'm really excited to see what comes of this. It would be really nice to see a person with on-the-ground experience that's had as much time on the road as yourself be part of the apparatus that regulates it, because I'm getting pretty damn tired of the professional managerial elite, in air quotes, sitting around in meetings, having no idea what they're doing, and taking a lot of our taxpayer dollars to make my life more difficult and ruin the industry, which I've dedicated most of my life to, as did my dad, who's still a driver, as did both my uncles and my grandpa. I have a long family history in trucking, and I'd like to see the trucking industry improve rather than be made worse. And unfortunately, our regulators are only making it worse. So if we can get you in there to help stop that and reverse it and make the industry better, awesome. And I think that's a great project for 2025.
There you go. And this doesn't have to happen immediately. You know, they haven't even put in Sean Duffy yet. There's time on this. Everybody's like, oh God, if you haven't heard anything yet, it's not going to happen. No, there's time. The president's not sworn in yet. Duffy's not in his position yet. So there's still time.
Right, yeah, and I'll try and, given the import of this episode, I'll try and get it out a whole lot sooner than I have been getting other episodes out recently. But anyway, guys, thank you so much. And I want to wish you all a happy new year. And thanks for everything that you do.
Thank you so much for having us on.
Yeah, thanks for having us on. We can do this again sometime, hopefully when I'm sitting in an office in DC. And don't worry, I'm not moving to DC. I still live in Wisconsin. I would just take the position and work there, still live here.
Right, very good. Well, best of luck, Lee. Thanks again for coming on, and way of the road.